So this is the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and I've had it since launch day, and I've also had the iPhone 14 Pro Max since launch day, but it's been about 3 months since getting this phone, and I want to talk about it compared to the 14 Pro Max, and if it's worth that upgrade now that I've had it, and kind of the newness has worn off, the trendiness of this has worn off. How much better is it over this iPhone 14 Pro Max? So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. Let's begin by talking about the design. Now that I've settled in for a few months with this phone, I will tell you that it definitely feels much nicer than the iPhone 14 Pro Max to hold. Not because the 14 Pro Max is not a premium, beautiful phone with stainless steel edges. This is also a premium, beautiful phone, but it's got a heftier feel, which I'm not a fan of for day-to-day usage because it just feels like it's more straining on the hand to use a heavier phone, and it gets tiring versus like a lighter phone. You just want to use something a little bit more light, and the iPhone 16 Pro Max gives you that. 227 grams versus 240 grams, or 8.01 ounces versus 8.47 ounces. Now, the other thing about this phone is not just really the weight, it's the edges. The edges and the sides of this phone just feel so much smoother to hold than the iPhone 14 Pro Max. There's like a sharper feel to this phone on the corners. It just doesn't feel quite as good. Both of them are flat display, so that's great. But the 14 Pro Max has this clunkier, sharper, heavier feel to it. Some people will say, oh, that feels more premium though, bro. I mean, it's heavier. It feels more like you got what you paid for. And there is an argument to be made for that. I'm not going to disagree with you on that one. But picking up the iPhone 16 Pro Max, it feels like peak this design right here. It's smooth. It's light, but still got enough heft to feel premium. It feels really nice. It just has less sharpness to the corners. And while there's probably phones that are more comfortable ergonomically, this phone to me just is a better design than this one over here, even though it's pretty similar. The camera control button, I will say, I accidentally press this sometimes though, so that is annoying sometimes. You don't have that here or that issue here for the iPhone 14 Pro Max. And both of them still have these cameras that stick relatively far off the body. So day to day, I do find that I have to have a case because it's very easy. If you drop this one time in the wrong corner, you can crack those lenses. So that's super annoying. I wish those cameras were a little flatter, but I don't think we're going to see that as the cameras are so high quality now. They do have to have really nice sensors, which usually stick off the body a little bit. I also noticed that the iPhone 14 Pro Max actually has slightly higher buttons. So the iPhone 16 Pro Max is slightly lower on those buttons. It's just a very small detail, but even though it has a bigger screen, slightly lower buttons, so better ergonomically. Now over here, the power button is basically in the same location, so there's no real issue there. That's not a big difference, but this side definitely a little bit different. We also have the action button over here versus the silent switch, which is quite nice. You can actually customize that button. And overall, the rest of the design is pretty much the same. But I just found that after 3 months, I like the polish, the feel of this one. It's just a little bit nicer. It doesn't matter the color you go with. It just feels nicer than this older product right here. Now, 3 months later, when it comes to display quality, the thing I notice most about this phone over the 14 Pro Max is mostly just those reduced bezels. That is the main difference. They both have like the same brightness. They both get pretty darn smooth. ProMotion displays, HDR10 support. They're both very smooth to operate, and both of them are 1959, and they both have the same 460 pixels per inch density. So they're essentially the same display with slightly reduced bezels for the iPhone 16 Pro Max. I really do like that the 14 Pro Max still has ProMotion because you can actually pick this up used and get a smoother display than something like a 15 Plus, a 14 Plus, a 16 Plus, a 16. But you're going to be giving up Apple Intelligence, which is super annoying. For sure. Both of them do have always on display here, but the bezels are just so noticeable here on the iPhone 14 Pro Max versus the newer one. I mean, look at that difference. It's pretty striking. Look how much thinner those are. That's a super striking difference there. Dynamic islands are on both of them, so that's not really a big deal. And you might not notice this bezel difference if you do have a case. And the 6.9 inch display is slightly bigger, which does make it a little bit more enjoyable. But really, I don't really feel too much in a quality sense a different display. It's just mostly that size and the bezels, which to you can make a difference or not. It's really up to you. I personally like it because I like innovation. I like seeing things get stretched to the absolute limit. I actually want to see a bezel-less iPhone. That's just me though. Let's talk about the cameras because it's a really big deal. What the iPhone 14 Pro Max brought was a 48 megapixel camera, and it was really, really good for sure. Let's go ahead and turn this around. However, people had to adjust to the fact that it had a different way of shooting. Like it had a lower aperture, so basically you would get more blur. Some people had to refocus the camera some, but definitely, it wasn't as easy to use as the 13 Pro Max just because of that newer sensor. Some people were thrown off a bit by it. But you just had to frame your photos a little bit better. But other than that, very good. Macro mode was available, really high quality 4K 60 video, RAW support. It's all there and it all works fantastic. On the front though, we have a 12 megapixel camera, 12 megapixel portrait, and no 4K 120 on slow-mo, but you do get 4K 30, 4K 24 over there, and pretty decent overall camera setup, still pro level, however missing a few features. It kind of reminds me of like buying a mirrorless camera from like a few years ago and then picking up a new one with a few new buttoned up features. All right, so let's go ahead and click the camera here and you'll see it tends to look a little bit better. The quality just looks nicer, the way it processes images. In addition to that, we do have better modes over here for easily accessing photo styles and raw modes. You do have some nice stuff here, but the camera control button can be useful depending on who you speak to. Some people will use it, some won't. It's really up to you. And then if we go over to video, we do have 4K 60 the same, 4K at 30. But what really improves here is months later, you just get used to having so much more zoom that it's really hard to go back to something with less zoom. So I feel like I would never want to go back to an iPhone with less zoom. This has 25 times, which is way more than this phone over here. So that's quite nice. Also, the big deal here is the 48 megapixel ultra wide camera on here. So both of these have a similar thing in that they both brought 48 megapixel sensors. This one keeps the main sensor from the 14 Pro Max, but brings 48 to the ultra wide, which means for those of you who love taking macro photography, you now have much sharper results on the macro shots, which is a big deal for those of you who want an all-around system in the back that is really, really high quality. All they got to do now is add 48 megapixels to the telephoto, and then we will have a complete 48 triple camera. That'll be really nice. If they threw 48 on the front one, that would be insane. 48 on all of the sensors would make this a top level pick once again for sure. So that's what I want to see going forward. But generally, the camera performance has been a good upgrade. I wouldn't say it's life-changing, definitely not. But it's definitely got those extra features that can enhance your work, like more zoom, 4K 120, and does have, a little bit better raw modes, a little bit better, camera control button if you like to use frame things in landscape and you just want to click the button to record. Stuff like that could be useful. And more power to, use Final Cut camera and things of that sort. So it is a enhancement for pros for sure, but you got to use those niche features. If you don't, it really doesn't matter. 14 Pro Max still an amazing choice and still at the pro level, but not, Pro 16 Pro Max level. So I do think 3 months later, I'm very happy with the camera upgrades. Now, when it comes to day-to-day use, performance and speed, I have to say the changes are not super noticeable. We do have an A16 Bionic on the right, and this is 6 gigabytes of RAM. The A18 Pro does fly along a little bit better, as does the 15 Pro Max over this phone. But generally, iOS is a lightweight software, so you don't really see it. You don't really notice it too much day to day. And I would say this is not the area that you're really going to see substantial changes in terms of the performance. However, you do have the new Siri and all the new AI features, including visual intelligence, that you can pop up right here from the camera itself. So these are some big changes to the phone. Also, ChatGPT integration on here with Apple Intelligence is pretty big change. As a matter of fact, all these iPhones like the 14 Pro Max and anyone that doesn't have the Apple Intelligence support now feels to me like a light version of the software. And this Siri just looks very old and outdated now because of the new Apple Intelligence. So For this reason alone, it's hard for me to even recommend buying any phone prior to the 16s or 15 Pro series that have no Apple Intelligence support. It's just not here. You're just going to be with this older, it just feels like a light or outdated version of iOS, and that's really un-Apple-like. So I'm not a fan of that, but the rest of the software is fine. All the apps are going to be supported. You could use AI-based apps. No, I'm just not a fan of that. So 3 months later, definitely digging the new stuff. I hope they don't do that again, though. I hope they make sure their phones stay powerful enough to support what's coming in the coming years, because this is really not an Apple-like thing. Usually they're usually where the company would have all of the features on some of your oldest phones in the lineup. Nowadays, though, most of them that just was a few years back can't get the Apple Intelligence. That I don't like. So for the software and performance, definitely going to pick the 16 Pro Max. It's a big leap forward. Now, one of the areas that wasn't the best for me for the 14 Pro Max was the battery life. And while I didn't struggle to get through the day because all of these big iPhones have big batteries, it just wasn't as long lasting as the 13 Pro Max nor the 15 Pro Max. And it's far behind that of the 16 Pro Max. Although I do love that space black color. That thing is just stunning, that space black. But this 16 Pro Max is giving me 13 Pro Max vibes. This thing lasts all day and then some. As a matter of fact, sometimes you can go 2 days if you have a busy day and you're not really on your phone too much, or you're using your phone even a medium amount. You should be able to go through a couple of days here for sure on the 16 Pro Max. So this thing is phenomenal. It's a big upgrade in the battery department. It's also a much larger size than this one. So 3 months later, I do think that the upgrades for battery are definitely worth it. If you wanted to sell this off, get a good amount of money back on it, and get yourself a 16 Pro Max, is definitely worth it for the battery life. This one definitely struggled a little bit there. Also, its lightning port now feels to me like a dinosaur compared to this USB-C over here, which came on the 15 series, but the ones on the Pro series are faster transfer, so that's something to keep in mind. Definitely faster for that kind of stuff. USB-C in general has been game-changing. It allows you to use all your chargers for all your other universal USB-C products and not have to be stuck with this proprietary lightning cable. And Apple went that way even with the AirPods Max and the MacBooks and the iPad. So it's USB-C for everything now. So that just feels really old and outdated. And 3 months later, I've looked back on this and I'm like, why do I even still have this phone? I'm thinking about trading this in for maybe another new Samsung phone or maybe a new iPhone in the future. So that's one of the features I'm not a big fan of anymore. And I also want to state that I'm not taking away from the 14 Pro Max's excellence. I praised this phone when it came out for a lot of great features. Some people hated the battery, the auto dimming that would happen if the phone got too bright during the outdoor sunlight. It would dim sometimes. I've talked about that as well. But I don't want to take away from the fact that this still had a gorgeous, super bright display, gorgeous cameras, 48 megapixel introduction, really fast CPU at the time, enough RAM to run iOS. It was still an amazing phone with the space black option. It's just stunning. Also, is the last of the stainless steel. So for those of you stainless steel fans out there, this is your move right here. So I just wanted to make that point known, that just because I was giving so much praise to the 16 Pro Max, it's not just because it's new. I do feel like those areas of improvement are substantial. This one still is a great phone. It really is. So don't let this video take away from that. I just want to make that very clear. Shockingly, and I don't talk about this in every single video, but the phone call quality and reception with the new Qualcomm modems in here a few months later has been really noticeable. This is just insane. Like, I usually don't get any bars in like these weird areas, but with the 14 Pro Max, I would get like 0 bars in my garage. This one, I definitely get good strength. So this is an area like actual 5G performance, mobile data, phone call quality. This actually has gotten better over this phone. A few months later, it's noticeable. Definitely mostly in the bar strength. This one still does a good job. Don't get it twisted, but this one has just took it to the next level. It's also faster in connectivity speed than that sort. At the end of the day, though, I covered the points I wanted to cover about both of these after a few months. I gotta say, this feels like they took the 14 Pro Max, they cleaned up all the issues, polished it up, gave you some forward-facing AI features, and I think it's an excellent upgrade from the 14 Pro Max or the 13 Pro Max. And 3 months later, I still feel this way. I do feel like from the 15 Pro Max, it's a harder sell, But from this phone, it's definitely really, really good. I will say though that it's not like so much different in terms of like your day-to-day life experience with an iPhone that like, it's not like going from like an iPhone 8 to an iPhone 10. It's more like going from an iPhone 11 to an iPhone 12 or like a 12 to a 13, but having a few more features than those used to have. So if you wanted to stick it out with the 14 Pro Max or the 17 series, no issues whatsoever recommending that either, because it wouldn't be that hard. You could just use ChatGPT or some other apps that are just downloadable from the App Store and still get some AI stuff. So let me know your thoughts about this one down below in the comments. Have a Merry Christmas, and I will catch you all in the next episode. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.